All right, so Warriors, how's it going? Today we have a really exciting guest on Soul Feed. His name is Derek Rydall. Welcome, Derek.
Hey, it's great to be here, man. It's really my honor and pleasure.
Yes, I've been really looking forward to this interview. Derek wrote an amazing book called The Law of Emergence. Emergence: 7 Steps for Radical Life Change. Derek is all about this idea that nothing is missing from your life. You didn't come to get anything out of this life, you came to give. So that's kind of what we're going to be unraveling and unfolding today. I'm just so excited about this interview. I feel like this is going to be a good one.
It's awesome, man. It's true. And I like to say giving is the new having.
Giving is a new habit. That's a perfect place to start. And
Yeah.
you know, I always like to start just by hearing sort of everyone's journey to getting to this place, right? Where obviously maybe you didn't start knowing these things, but what kind of got you to this point now that you're at?
Yeah. Although when I was born, people did come and leave gifts by my crib and incense, frankincense, and more, but we won't get into that.
Nice.
No, absolutely, man. No, I
Wait, so are you
struggled.
saying you were Jesus or you are Jesus?
um,
Did they follow the star to get to your crib?
Jesus of the Valley, of the San Fernando Valley. No, I struggled for years trying to improve my life, and over a decade of self-improvement, you know, therapy and counseling and strategies. And after all that time, the only thing I improved was my ability to describe why my life was so messed up.
Mm.
So I got very articulate at and very much improved in my ability to tell you why things didn't work. When I was 5 and mommy didn't love me, and when I was 10 and my dad saw my report card and there was one B and all A's, and he said, "Hey son, what's with the B?" So I was really good at that. But rather than my life growing and becoming more, all of my efforts at self-improvement actually made me feel more inadequate, more frustrated, like I was trying to dig myself out of a hole. And the more you dig, the deeper in the hole you get. And eventually it drove me to become addicted to drugs and alcohol to try to quell the pain and the frustration. And I almost died of an overdose. And I remember lying in the emergency room with the IV snaking out of my arm and the beep of the machine, and I'm coming to consciousness, and the doctor says, "You're lucky to be alive, son." And
Mm.
I remember thinking that wasn't good news. In other words, when you're told you actually are not dead, you actually made it, and you don't take that as good news. I knew I'd really hit a rock bottom place. And I couldn't understand how all of my efforts to improve my life had gotten me there. And they say the universe whispers in your ear and then taps you on the shoulder and then takes a 2x4 to your head. And there I was lying in a bed of splinters. I think the universe took a tree trunk to my head, and I still didn't get it. I was like, maybe I just need to work harder or work smarter. And so I doubled my efforts and I dug in more. And for a while, things got a little bit better. And I ended up getting a lead role in a movie, and I was in Jamaica, and the whole movie fell apart. The director was fired. The actors were getting fired. I was probably next. And I had this messy onset romantic breakup. And I was like, man, can I catch a break here? And so I decided to go diving in this reef, sort of, which was, alone, which was the first mistake. And the second mistake was I prayed to just get lost from everything above. And you got to be careful what you pray for because very quickly I got tremendously lost in this reef. And then I got trapped in this pocket of spiked coral. It was like giant rows and spikes of coral, inches from my throat, my neck, my stomach, my eyes, inches from it. And I couldn't swim away because there was walls around me covered in fire coral that was like one touch was like 1,000 jellyfish stings. I couldn't
Wow.
swim down because I would have been skewered. I had to paddle with the tips of my fingers to stay at a certain water level so I wouldn't just get skewered. And I had to breathe in these short staccato breaths, like, because if I took a deep breath, I would have been punctured. And I knew nobody knew I was out there, so nobody was coming to save me. And my mind was just this storm of thoughts, like, how stupid could you be? Why did you do this? And all the tapes that had been beating me up all my life unconsciously became conscious. Suddenly, all those unconscious beliefs, you're so stupid, you're never going to amount to anything. See, I knew, like, it suddenly became conscious. All of this self, loathing and pain. And it was just intense. It was like this intense life review. And I finally got to a moment where I knew nobody was coming. I had nothing left in my body to keep me afloat. And I tried to bargain with the universe, God, if you get me out of this, I promise to go to church on Sunday. And the universe was not cutting any deals. And finally, I knew that I was going to drown. It was just complete finality. I was going to drown. And all that was left was to let go, completely, unconditionally let go. And so I did. And in that moment of unconditional surrender, like a flash, it's like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and the shell cracked open. And this light, I saw that this guy, this self that I've been trying to fix and achieve and improve upon, was a fictional character. He was an amalgamation of parental fantasies and societal conditioning and peer pressure. And nothing I ever would do would ever make him enough. He was a fiction. But right behind him, there was this other me, this energy, this something that had never been hurt or damaged, and so he didn't need to be fixed. And he was already complete, so he could not be improved upon. And it was just this flash of awareness, and in that same moment, this wave came along, or the water lifted. I still don't exactly know what happened, but suddenly in the next moment, I was standing outside of this pocket, looking in where I'd been trapped for this whole ordeal. And first of all, the exit was inches from me the whole time, but I couldn't see it.
So this was all happening as you're about to drown.
As I'm about to drown. It was a flash, one of those blinding flash moments that only takes a millisecond, but everything is so slowed down that it feels like you're there for a long time.
Totally.
Like when you get in a car, if you've ever been in a car accident and all of a sudden it's like all spinning in slow motion.
Yep.
And then bam, it all comes back to full speed. And that's what happened. And in that moment, it was like my ego was ripped from its moorings. And I looked at this labyrinth I'd been swimming through, and it was like a metaphor for my life. I had been swimming through this maze, following all these brightly colored objects, trying to get lost or distracted or figure things out. And I'd become trapped. I was gasping. I was drowning. That was my life. And in this moment, it all became like 3D. And something had radically shifted. There was like this luminosity to everything. And I swam out finally. And over the next several months, I pulled out of society entirely and was going to become a monk. But the monk life didn't quite work for me. 3 or 4 days into fasting and retreating, I got so hungry and so panicked and freaked out that I broke into the monk's kitchen in the middle of the night and stole food out of the refrigerator. And the monks kindly suggested perhaps the monastic life wasn't for me. And so I ended up cloistering myself in my apartment.
Dude, you're like Jean Valjean.
Right, exactly.
He's Jean Valjean. Some people will get that reference. Others have no idea what I just said.
It's awesome. I love that you're singing it too. So we'll turn this into like a spiritual duet.
Yes.
So I ended up going to my apartment, and I stayed in this environment in my apartment, got rid of TV, news, books, everything, and just went into this deep inner journey where I discovered I had to figure out what happened to me. What was this flash? What did it mean? And I began to realize, which we'll obviously go talk more about, that the whole idea of how we're designed to grow and succeed is backwards. That just like the oak tree is already in the acorn, and the acorn doesn't have to go out and attract an oak or achieve an oak or become worthy of an oak, that when it surrenders to the soil and the conditions in the soil match the pattern already in the seed, its inherent potential naturally emerges. And this is how all of nature works. It's emergent. And that's what we now know from quantum physics too. There's a field of pure potential, and through the observer effect, when the conditions align, that idea emerges. And so I saw that all of my efforts to attract and achieve and improve my life were creating most of the resistance to this natural process and blocking it from unfolding. And as I got that and caught that and practiced and began to integrate it, my life began to flourish again. And I went from being broke and broken and literally suicidal, living on 19 cents boxes of macaroni and cheese in a little one-room apartment, to ultimately, global travel and global business, and all the things I've been struggling began to unfold much more naturally.
Yeah, I mean, you now have a 7-figure business. You're coaching
Right.
Fortune 500 execs, Oscar, Emmy winners, thought leaders. I mean, it's really, really incredible.
Right.
And I want to get into, the content of what you teach, but also I'm really, really fascinated with like what that, because correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you spend like 2 years sort of in like solitude after the monk thing, like just kind of meditating
Yeah.
and going through that?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I like I said, I sort of cloistered myself in my North Hollywood apartment and went on this inward journey, and you just would meditate all day and read just sacred texts and different things, and just became a disciple of all the great, ancient teachings and philosophies that actually beforehand made no sense to me. Buddha's
Right.
teachings, Jesus' teachings, Lao Tzu, Kuan Yin. It was like, this is crazy. This is BS. I remember literally throwing the Bible across the room, not getting any of it, angry at it all, frustrated with it all. And after this opening, I started to read and actually saw what they were saying. And
Yeah.
interestingly, which I'm sure you understand, they were all fundamentally saying the same thing,
Right.
just in different, covered over by doctrine and dogma and cultural idioms that, in historical metaphors and things that were very contextual for their place and their time. So you had to kind of decipher through all of that language and metaphors what they were really saying. And lo and behold, there was a perennial truth teaching that was there was one tree of truth, but it had many branches. And as I began to discover that core principle, my life began to, blossom in a whole new way.
So what for you is that one tree of truth?
Well, I would say that the core fundamental principle is a principle of oneness, and that fundamentally we are one with everything we could ever want. Just like a branch is not separate from the tree. It's an expression or extension of the tree. And the fruits and the flowers and the leaves that it produces are not coming from the branch. They're coming through the branch, but they're coming from the tree. I mean, you can use the analogy of a tree as a metaphor for everything. And when we think we have our own separate life, we are like a branch that is cut off from the tree. And that branch begins to wither and die. Because, like the prodigal son story, the son leaves the father's house, takes his inheritance, and goes on a journey and tries to make his own life. And he ends up spending all of his inheritance, becoming broken, living with prostitutes and pigs in a hovel. And eventually he's like, Dad, can I come home again? And comes back, and he's welcomed back, and he gets all the bounty. Well, that's a metaphor for our life. All human suffering is based on this one core misunderstanding that we're separate from life, that we're separate from the source of life and each other. That's the only problem, and the only solution is ultimately to remember, which means to put the members, the limbs back together again, or to awaken to the fact that we're one with life, and that life is totally on our side, and we just have to learn how to be on our own side. And that's the fundamental teaching, no matter who's teaching it in the great philosophies and teachings. They're all saying the same thing. You are the thing itself. You're one with the thing itself. You're an expression of the thing itself. And you have to get in touch with that, and then you have to let it out. And so the other thing is, one of the misunderstandings is that we believe we're on our way to something. We're on our way to enlightenment, or we're on our way to heaven, or we're on our way back to God or back to love. No, you are not. The sunbeam is not on its way to the sun. The sunbeam is coming from the sun. It's an emanation of the sun. You're not on your way to God, love, truth, beauty, power, abundance. You are literally an emanation of it, on your way to expressing more of it. So we got to let go of all these ideas that one day we're going to reach heaven, home, God, enlightenment, and go, no, we are coming from the light. Now our work here is to shine it, to circulate it, to express what Robert Browning, the great poet, said is the imprisoned splendor within us. And when our whole life gets what I call the great reversal, when we reverse this trend of trying to get something or attract something or draw something to us and realize I'm the source of everything, let me bring it, let me give it. As I say in the Emergence work, whatever's missing is what you're not giving. Whatever you're waiting for, you're actually weighing it down. And so this is the ultimate weight loss program, WAIT. So that's for me what the great perennial teaching is. You're it, you've got it all, you're missing nothing. Now what are you going to do about it? What are you going to bring to your life?
Mm-hmm. So there's so much to unravel in this, and I love this because this is,
is it feeding your soul?
This is just like the truth for me. You know what I mean?
Yes,
this is like what absolutely. I have come to remember, and I'm not going to say no because there's nothing to know. There's just things to remember, but
yes,
I'm sort of wondering, like, because there's a difference between knowing and being, right?
Yeah.
Like knowing these things and being these things. And so what does like your meditative, like when you were in those inner journeys, like I'm interested in like, what were you seeing? Like, do you let things come to you? Do you consciously try to visualize things, or what's your sort of meditative process like that others might be able to glean from and possibly integrate within their own practice? Or how has it evolved?
Absolutely.
All that stuff. I'm so fascinated.
Absolutely. Well, when I first started trying to improve my life, I was using law of attraction type things and techniques to visualize and attract and make stuff happen. But the problem was the premise was wrong. I was coming from a place of I'm lacking, something's missing, something's wrong, something's broken.
Right.
And then even when I would manifest a bigger paycheck, I was just broke at a higher income bracket. And I had just magnified my internal sense of separation and, just had more stress around it. And, or I'd manifest and magnetize a new job and have the same jerky boss just wearing a different uniform. And so it wasn't sustainable. And then I had to use all my energy to hold it all together because I didn't really own it. I didn't really have it. I was just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And we've learned to become good manipulators, but that only takes you so far. So then I began to learn how to surrender and open up and become more of a channel, more aware of what is this larger something that's actually knocking at my door and trying to emerge through me. That, the word desire comes from a root of the sire or of the father or of the creative principle or also from the heavens. And it doesn't mean your desire isn't something outside you need to go get. It's a sign of something inside trying to get out. And so as I began to know that, me and my wife used to call it, there's a movement going on. We could feel a movement. And we would just begin to kind of sense into what is this movement? What is this something that's trying to emerge at this next level? What is that evolutionary impulse? I'm feeling something. There's a desire, there's a pull. And as I began to meditate around getting in touch with that inner impulse, that inner movement, it was almost like I was teasing it into consciousness and into awareness. And then I would let it guide and direct my next steps. And as I did that, I was learning to live more from insight than eyesight. When you're living by eyesight, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, so letting it guide your next steps, like tangibly, what is that? Like, give me an example of what that kind of looked like.
Sure. So like an example was, we were living in a little apartment and we had a new baby, and there was just this energy of like, we're meant to have a beautiful home with a yard, and it was just pulling at us. And, for our child to grow up in, but we looked at our bank account, we're like, that's crazy. We can't even, how could we ever afford that? There's no way. And so most people would stop there. They'd be like, okay, well, yeah, we can't even begin to afford it. So let's stop having that conversation. It's too painful. And let's instead, go have some Ben and Jerry's and watch a reality show, and not feel the pain. not feel the pain of not being able to have the thing we want. But instead it was like, okay, there's a home here that's trying to happen. And so that was the vision, that was the seed idea. And then that's the first step of the emergence process, or what I call emergineering, which is about engineering this emergence. It's very practical. The second step was, okay, if there's a real home here that's trying to be born, we're not going to look at our resources, we're going to look at our resourcefulness and begin to go, how can I start to move in the direction of it? How can I start to cultivate the soil of my soul where this seed is planted so that it's in integrity with it? And that looks like the kind of thoughts you think, the kind of emotions you feel, the way you're showing up in the world. If we were already living in that dream home, how would we feel? What would we think? How would we talk? How would we show up? And we began to cultivate that lifestyle, that way of life, and we began to bring that energy and excellence and love and appreciation to our little townhouse. So that we weren't waiting.
Kind of living.
Exactly. We were like, if this was our dream home, how would we appreciate it? How would we love it? How would we value it? How would we play in it? And we began to suddenly see all kinds of opportunities to fill out the space we did have.
Got it.
And that's a key piece. And as we filled out that space, the next thing was like, let's go look at dream homes. Let's actually start to look at them and have conversations and have picnics in the parks by them. And little bit by little bit, we'd go to the dream home, then we'd come back to our home and we'd be like depressed because it was so small and dark compared to that. We're like, okay, let's keep doing the work. Let's paint the walls. Let's bring fresh flowers in. Let's do what we can do. It's like a plant. A small plant, you put it in a little pot, and it doesn't look out at all the bigger pots in the field and go, oh, why don't I have a bigger pot? If only I had a bigger pot. Because if it did that, it wouldn't grow in the little pot, and it would stay in the little pot. Instead, it goes, let me grow and make the most of this little pot. And it fills it out. And then what does the gardener do? It replants it into a bigger pot. And then again, it fills it out and it replants it into a bigger pot. We look at our life and go, oh, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the resources. And we are so focused on our circle of, what's outside of our circle of influence, that we stay small or even shrink. And so this process, we began to fill out and move in the direction of our vision. And within about 2 months or so, 2.5 months, we were moving into our dream home.
And so how did that dream home come about? Was it just like, because I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's this definite balance between action and releasing and receiving. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's one that I am still trying to figure out. You know what I mean?
Yes. Absolutely.
So with that analogy and that story you were telling, maybe you could continue on that.
Definitely. There's what I call the 3 pillars of the unfoldment of your true potential. There's feeling, being, and doing. And you need all 3. A lot of people are conditioned just to be doing. So they're just human doings. They're doing. But their feeling and being is not in integrity with their doing. It's not in integrity with their vision. And as the old metaphysical statement says, to he who is wrong in mind, he can do all the right things and it'll still turn out wrong. But to he who is right in mind, he can do all the wrong things and it will still turn out right. So the doing is valuable, but it's only one piece of the congruence. Other people, like in the spiritual world, let's say spiritual path, they're all into the being.
Right.
And so they're just going to go with the flow of their being. Well, going with the flow is a very dangerous and tricky thing because you don't know what flow you're flowing on. It's like, if you just go with the flow down the river, you might end up getting stuck in an eddy and in brambles, or go over the cliff waterfall and crash in the rocks below.
Or land in some reefs about to drown.
Exactly. So you have to flow, but not forget to row. You have to flow and then row, flow and then row, flow and then row. And so it's both and, until you're so purified that the only flow moving through you is the one flow. But most of us aren't there and maybe never will be. So if you're just being, a lot of people they're learning all this stuff, they're meditating, and really their meditation becomes a form of medication. And they actually are numbing themselves to the impulse that's saying, take action, step into your life, have that hard conversation. And real character, which means the etch of God on our soul, is what we're really here to develop. You know, our conditions don't determine our destiny, our character does. Our habits determine our character. And as Confucius said, all men are alike, but it's their habits that separate them. So what you're focused on, committed to, which comes from your vision and intention, ultimately builds habits which create the etch of God on your soul. They build your character, and that ultimately determines your destiny regardless of circumstances. And what your soul cares about is not how many great possessions you have at the end of the year or end of a lifetime, but how much possession you have of yourself, how much more of yourself you've discovered and embodied and claimed. So we have to be doing the being work for sure. But then your action is really your living affirmation. Your action is your true religion. You want to know what somebody really believes? Look at what they're doing. And so when you marry those two, your feeling, your being, and your action, now you have the sacred Trinity. And as the ancient scripture says, where two or more are gathered in agreement in my name and nature, there I am in the midst of them. That's not a religious statement. That's a statement of the great I am, the great pattern of your potential. When these three parts of you are in agreement or in alignment or in integrity, your feeling, being, and action are in integrity with your highest vision, that's like the sacred combination that opens the vault of the treasures that your life is here to reveal and express. But again, most people are either totally stuck in the being, or they're totally stuck in the realm of feeling, or they're totally stuck in the realm of doing, or they kind of sort of go back and forth, but they haven't learned to design a way of life where the feeling, being, and doing is progressively coming into integrity with their highest vision. When that happens, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you're facing, no matter what your karma is, your life, that true purpose and potential will begin to emerge.
So with this house again, what was sort of the doing aspect?
Are you looking to get a house? Is that what's really going on here? No.
Well, yeah, part of me is, yeah, right, but no, I'm just trying to, because this is one thing that I find frustrating sometimes with people in our space. A lot of times we don't ever talk about the doing.
Right.
Okay. Like, you know, it takes work to do what we do, right? It takes work to do what Gabby Bernstein does, to do what Madison Kipp does, to do what Deepak Chopra does. And yet we're not always talking about that. Do you know what I mean? And it gives this disillusion that, like, oh, if you meditate on it and sit in parks and, you know, visit your homes, 2 months later, you'll have the house. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes, absolutely.
And I'm not saying you're doing that, but I'm saying, like, as an example, you know? So I think it's really important for people to also hear, like, and granted, you can tell I lean more on the doing side, you know what I mean? Which is something I'm integrating more, the being and the feeling, obviously. But anyway, so could you touch on that?
Yeah, no, you know, what is that great quote by, is it Rilke? You know, something about boldness has power in it, you know, advance in the direction of your dreams and providence will come in. So the doing is very, very vital. Now, it is true that if you could, as an ancient state or an old statement says, to he or she who can most perfectly practice inaction, to them all things are possible. And what that's talking about is that so often much of our doing is coming from this sense of separation. And we're just producing more and more resistance. And so we do have to have a practice and a way of life that ultimately allows us to get still enough and quiet enough to let go of those coping and defense mechanisms that are merely trying to survive, that are coming from this false self of separation, to really purify. That's what it means in the old text to die daily and to be reborn again. It means that false self, that's why Jesus said, if you try to save your life, you'll lose it. But if you're willing to lose your life, you'll have life eternal. These are all principles we don't get usually until you see the truth, then it all makes sense. This is talking about the death of that egoic self that thinks it's separate from its good, that thinks it's on its own and it has to make stuff happen. That has to die. That has to be progressively released. So when you're about to take an action, you can check in and see, Do I feel constricted? Is this coming from fear or lack? Or do I feel expanded? Is it coming from a place of vision and inspiration? Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to feel good or not scary. A lot of times you'll feel scared, you'll feel nervous, but there's still something trying to move through you. And when you are willing to honor that, and not merely your emotions, but honor your vision, you are increasingly in alignment with that, and you're becoming a better and stronger instrument of it. So that's, it feels like a conundrum. You know, if you read certain things, it says, don't do anything, be still and know the truth within you. Stand still and watch as life unfolds around you. And there is truth to that. If you can become still enough and tap in to who you really are and this power that's really living you, it can manifest in your life in seeming miraculous ways. I've proven that over and over again. But as it unfolds through you, it will, remember, you're not just the branch of the tree, you're actually the tree itself, and the branch is one of the ways you're expressing. So it might unfold through multiple branches. So, you know, everybody in the world, nobody is your source, but everybody is your channel. So as you tap into that truth, it very well might unfold as somebody calling you and knocking at your door, and an opportunity, quote unquote, coming out of the blue into your lap. Absolutely. Other times it will use you, and it will show up as an idea and a movement and an action you need to take. And ultimately it's using all of it. So it's using you as a channel, it's using your neighbor as a channel, it's using your partner as a channel, it's using your enemy as a channel. It's using everything to reveal an idea that's bigger than all of that. And so it will move you into what's called compelling right action. And that's the kind of action you want to take. When I used to find myself doing, because I was a real doer, and I'm still a doer, I used to have a practice where I would fast from doing. I would take a day off, and I would sit in my meditation chair, and I would just notice all the energy of needing to do stuff. And as I got beneath that, I would see that it was being driven by fear, by anxiety, by fear of losing out, missing out, failing, not succeeding. And I would just observe all of these levels of motivation so they would begin to be burned off, dissolved, disintegrated through the awareness and the stillness. And then at some point, a real moment of inspiration might bubble up. And it would be like, make this call, send this email. And I would do that and only that, and go back into silence again. So during a whole day, I might take one or two actions, or sometimes none. And as a result of that fasting from this shallow, superficial pattern of doing, I would open up to, I'd become a clearer instrument for the right action in my life. And then I could trust my actions more, and I would be taking actions more from an inspired place. And then I'd find myself suddenly getting really, really busy again, and really, really anxious again, and doing all this stuff, trying to make stuff happen and call that client and try to get them to buy my, and I'd stop again. I would take a day off, fast from all of that, burn through some of those layers, have another insight, a vision, guidance, and then move out. And every time I would do that, my life would get taken to a new level. And it would start to integrate a whole new level. Now, and it's very important to know, when you start to tap in and get still like that, your life will get filled with activity. You won't have less and less to do. You'll have more and more to do. You know,
Right.
You know, Jesus wasn't sitting around in a cave. Mother Teresa wasn't sitting around in a nunnery. You know, Gandhi didn't just sit in his sackcloth and meditate. You know, these individuals were seriously about the business of their mission. And your mission and your vision doesn't take vacations. You know, you're always on purpose. So as you tap in and have the trust to tap in, this idea that brought you into this incarnation, it has work to do. It has a gift to deliver. You know, the word human comes from a Sanskrit term that means the dispenser of divine gifts. So you have something to contribute, create, and deliver here. And interestingly enough, if you're not delivering the fruit of your branch, of your tree, like the parable of the fig tree where it's not producing any figs and Jesus curses it and it dies, people don't understand, like, why would he do that? So they just kind of avoid that parable. But it's really a metaphor. If you're not producing fruits, you get pruned. You know, what does a gardener do when a branch stops producing? It cuts the branch off. So if you're not producing the fruit of your kind and delivering the gifts you're here for, your life will start to stagnate and you will start to have problems. And so we have to be doing, but we want to marry it to when we take action, to start with the feeling and the sense of being as if it's already done. And then move from there. As that saying, as I said before, to he who is right in mind, he can do all the wrong things, it'll still turn out right. So if you're coming from the authentic state of being and integrity, and you might even be doing the wrong things, no problem. Like a GPS, your inner God positioning system, it will guide you back on track. And that's one of the things, you know, a lot of people are like, well, I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do. Is it my ego talking or my spirit talking? I got to wait until I'm sure. No, no, and no. That's a stall tactic of the ego. And it's trying to trick you into thinking you're going to have all the answers before you start. You know, if you're sitting in your car looking at your GPS and going, I'm not moving until you give me all the directions, you'll be sitting there forever, right? You got to start moving. And then it doles out the next turn and the next turn and the next turn. And when do you know it hasn't completely screwed you up? The last turn. If you've never been there, it's like, for all you know, it's taking you on a wild goose chase. That last turn, when you see the place you're supposed to go. So that's how life unfolds. It's kind of a need to know basis.
I really love your fasting from doing. I've never really heard that before. I think that's sort of, I've interviewed a lot of people, you know what I mean? And I always talk about this dichotomy of doing versus being versus feeling, you know. And I'm realizing now, after hearing you say that, like, you know, doing is just a habit, just like anything else, you know?
Yes.
And so you have to train that habit just like any other habit, you know, to get
Absolutely.
back to your like core essence and truth. And so, and I'm particularly interested in this, obviously, for myself, but I think other soul warriors will be really interested in this idea too, because I think what happens is a lot of times we fill our days with doing because we're afraid of the silence.
Absolutely, man.
We're afraid of what's really going to come up, you know, because it might be
entirely right.
It might be the truth, and you know, obviously, sometimes. What's that saying?
I'm gonna.
Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. What's the saying? What's the saying?
You know, sometimes it's better not to know the truth, or whatever that saying is. You know what I mean? Like ignorance is bliss sometimes. You know.
Right. And it's really not true, actually, that ignorance is bliss.
Of course not.
You know, but the thing about it is that, yeah, if you're doing from a compulsive place, busyness comes from, it's a compulsive coping mechanism. You are actually running from something. That's how the shadow works. So somewhere early on in your life, you got wounded around a particular way of expressing or being. Maybe you used to relax a lot and enjoy your life and sit under a tree and dream. And your dad was like, come on, man, stop being lazy. You know, there's work to do or whatever. And you got shamed or scared or punished for a state of being or even a state of doing. And you repress that part of you and you create an alter part of you to compensate. So maybe if you were always just allowing life to flow and you were called a dreamer and you were made fun of, or your teacher said, stop dreaming, and your dad said, come on, you got to do yard work, stop being lazy. The lazy, dreaming, being part of you became a shadow. And then to feel like you were beloved and safe and fit in, you developed the productive part, the independent part, the practical part, the normal part. And that became your identity, your persona, and your drive. And the drive was to try to run away from this other part of you that was a source of pain and shame and fear. Now, the good news is that because of that, your drive was actually developing real capacities in you. So you really do become able to be productive and focused and disciplined. That's all the gift of the shadow. But at a certain point, that runs its course and it can't get you to the next level. You have to actually turn around and embrace the thing you've been running from. the thing you've been denying, rejecting, trying to pray away and affirm away, that lazy, angry, whatever part of you, dreamer part of you. But when you embrace it and integrate it, it doesn't turn you into a lazy dreamer, fantasizer. It actually activates latent gifts, talents, and abilities. Your ability to be more of a more being, your ability to tap into bigger vision and fantasy and potential. It actually is the very piece that's been missing all along, creating problems in your life to get your attention. Procrastination, burnout, overwhelm, anger, addiction. It's all a symptom that there's another part of you that is trying to emerge, but your current way of life is blocking it and preventing it by keeping you busy, keeping you active. Or on the converse, if you're a person that's not doing, you got a message early on that being powerful in the world, being a doer, maybe you had a dad that was a worker and a businessman, and that caused pain in your family because he wasn't around a lot, or there was abuse, and you repressed this powerful part of you and created the more open, flexible, go with the flow kind of being part of you, because that seemed to be the way to be safe and not be a bad person. So all of these are, every single challenge we're facing is really an opportunity in disguise. Our problems are our answered prayers. Our problems are literally prophesizing to us, telling us what's trying to be born in us, what's trying to be embodied in us. And we've learned to be problem solvers, but we have to instead become vision holders. And that's why Einstein said you can't solve a problem at the level of thinking that created it. We have to rise above that level. And this causes us, this often requires us to become still if you're a person who's always doing, or to take bold action out of your comfort zone if you're a person that likes to just be. So it depends on where you fall.
You guys are gonna have to rewind this episode and go back and listen.
Let me say one other quick thing about doing, just to put this in another context. Feeling, being, and doing are not separate dimensions. They're all on a spectrum of consciousness.
Right.
So all there is consciousness. The only thing that's ever doing or being or acting is consciousness. Nothing moves but consciousness. It's only your mind that's moving. And then it manifests along the spectrum. So the first level of manifestation of consciousness is energy. Then it coagulates into a denser form of consciousness called thought. Then it coagulates into a denser form called speech. And then it coagulates into a denser form called doing, and then or action. And then finally it coagulates into your body and to the body of your experience. But it's all consciousness. So your actions are another way of activating your consciousness. It's not separate. It's not like there's spirit or consciousness inside and over here, and then there's this separate material world of action over there. That's an illusion. There's a spectrum of the unfoldment of consciousness. So if you're only activating the feeling and being dimension of your consciousness, it's like trying to hold the tripod with two legs. It's going to keep falling over. It's not going to be able to stand. There won't be integrity. But when you look at your actions, not as a way to make something happen, but as a way to express what is already in your consciousness, as a way to make it welcome, now you're getting into the right context of how action is supposed to happen. So you're not, when I went out there and I was going and looking at houses and talking to realtors and picnicking in the park and all the actions I was taking, I wasn't taking those actions to make a house happen. Just like when a woman is pregnant, she creates a nursery, she takes vitamins, she exercises, she does all these things. She's not doing that to make a baby happen. The baby's already in her. She's doing that to create a congruent environment that makes the baby welcome. She's acting like a woman that's pregnant. She's acting like a woman who's going to have a baby. She's acting like a mother. She's not doing it to be to try to make a mother happen. She's acting from what's already true about her. And if she does that, baby gets developed, baby gets born, and the experience of being a mother becomes manifest. So when I'm writing a book or doing this podcast or whatever we're doing, we're not doing this to make some future success happen. We're doing this because who we are and what our vision is, this is an extension of it. This is an expression of it. Mm. We are filling out this space with thinking, feeling, being, and doing that is congruent with our emerging vision. And if we do that, then the next thing unfolds, and the next thing unfolds, the next thing unfolds. But it only unfolds out of the moment because we're showing up and filling it out fully with our feeling, being, and doing. So, that's not, I'll give you one last analogy, then we can move on. To make this even more, hopefully people will get this. I like to hit it from a few different angles, spiritual, religious, scientific, an analogy, so people will get it. But right where everybody is right now, your favorite music is broadcasting. And there's all these broadcasts. Within it, your favorite music is. But it's not manifest right now. You have to actually tune the dial of your receiver to the frequency where it's playing. And when your receiver becomes the frequency where that music is playing, then that station becomes manifest. Or as I like to say, you have a manifestation. And so that music didn't happen in the distance or in the future. You didn't have to take your radio and run down the street and catch it. It was already broadcasting where you are, right? But it was not manifest yet. So manifestation is not about making something happen that's not already here. You can't. It's impossible. It will never happen. It's about making that which is already here tangible. So you have to actually tune the dial. You can't just sit there and pray to the gods of music and it's going to suddenly come into tune. You have to actually tune through that and up and down, and you hear the static, and then you got to tune back and then forward. It takes action, but then also it takes tuning in. So the mental and emotional part is like the vibrational frequency. The physical part of tuning the dial is the work it's required to bring all of your frequency into alignment with that station. And then suddenly the music is manifest and you're grooving to the beat of abundance. You're dancing to that symphony of success. But it's already here. It's already now. It's never, your dreams don't come true. You have to be true to them. They're already true. And that's what the great masters taught, when they were like, hey, Jesus, when is heaven going to come? And he's like, check it out, guys. Heaven's not going to come. It's already at hand. But you're using your eyes to judge and your ears, and that's why you don't see it, because you're living from your senses. It's within you. It's here. It's now. It's happening. You got to tune into that. All the great masters taught that same principle. It's already here. It's already happening. But if we're not experiencing it, we have to tune our consciousness through thinking, feeling, being, and doing until the way we're living is now in integrity with that frequency of our destiny. And then it begins to manifest and unfold, and all that goodness begins to show up. Mm.
I mean, I kind of want to end it here because I was so brilliant, but there's still like one more thing looming for me.
Absolutely.
Because, thank you for all that. That was so brilliant. And it makes me, it's leading into this question, which is about this idea of self-improvement. So there is, I guess I'm trying to cipher out what is because we're in the self-help industry, the self-improvement industry, personal development. And there is a part of us that is tuning it, that is remembering that divine consciousness and all that. So how do you kind of make that distinction between beating yourself up, but also recognizing that there is a part of you that is wanting to emerge, which does take, you are improving.
Right. So that's a great question. And the first thing I want to say is those three labels are all different. Self-help, self-improvement, and personal development are not the same.
Yeah.
Self-improvement is an oxymoron. You cannot improve the self. When you discover the real nature of the self, you realize it's already perfect. When you plant an acorn, the oak tree is not an improved version of the acorn, and the acorn is not an inadequate version of the oak tree. It's a perfect acorn, but it has a much bigger pattern that's emerging. An acorn is just one level of that unfoldment. Plato called the realm of perfect forms. Everything that unfolds has to have first been enfolded. It's got to already exist in the quantum field or in the mind of the universe, whatever concept works for you. And so, mathematics, 2 + 2 = 4. It didn't, 1,000 years ago equal 3, and it got improved into equaling 4. The law of aerodynamics hasn't been improved over the ages. During the time of Buddha, we could have flown planes and worked supercomputers if we had just tapped into that idea that was already available.
Well, and in Egypt, they did have, spiritual technology
and they did, right,
that built
exactly.
pyramids and amazing things.
Exactly. And we couldn't build a pyramid today if our life depended on it, because we've lost touch with that principle and those ideas. But so nothing is being created that doesn't exist. There's an unfoldment of something that is already existent, that's already here. Again, to use a biblical reference, because these are principles, when it says in Genesis, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all that was made out of the Word, and nothing else was made that was not made with the Word. And God saw it, named it good, and it was done. Creation was done. Now, that wasn't an event in time. That's a description of an isness. Creation is done. You cannot add to it. You cannot improve upon it. But it's an infinite idea, an infinite pattern that is eternally unfolding in time and space, and I'm sure many other dimensions. So we're tapping into that idea that's always knocking, that's always pushing, it's always trying to unfold the next level, the next level, the next level. So that's the truth of ourself. It's done, it's complete, it's perfect. You can't improve upon it. So that's why self-improvement is a misunderstanding or an oxymoron. Self-help is the process. Life is totally for you. Life is totally on your side. But because of this sense of separation, we're often not on our own side. And so self-help is helping the self, is actually getting on your own side, is getting on the side of the real self. That's like, yo, man, I got it all here. I'm trying to get out. Help brother out. Help me out so I can come out and play and express. So self-help is the process of tending to the self and loving it and honoring it. As Rumi said, if you could see who you really are, you would bow and worship at your own feet. So that's self-help. We're helping this part of us to come out, right? And then personal development is the process. Once we've gotten into self-help, once we've let go of self-improvement, we've accepted that the self is perfect, we move into self-help. Now let me help the self out. Let me get on my own side and really nurture that baby that's trying to be born. Now we move into personal development. So what can I begin to do to cultivate the conditions, to create a congruent environment, to develop my mind and my heart and my body, and to let go of what is not congruent, so that I create that beautiful nursery, that beautiful welcoming space for the self to be born into. And so that leads us into domains of knowledge, like I'm going to develop my writing ability. I'm going to develop my ability to podcast. I'm going to develop my speaking ability. But remember, you're not adding those abilities to you. Personal development it's not personal addition. It's you're developing it. You're cultivating it. You're actually remembering and recognizing what is always been there. In fact, the root word of education is from the Latin word educare, which means to educe, to draw out of. So the real process of educating oneself is not filling your head with a bunch of stuff that's not there. It's a process of remembering, reactivating, and drawing out of you the genius and the eternal wisdom and the perennial truths that are already there.
Right.
So when you're reading a book, going to a podcast, you're not adding anything. We can't add anything to you guys. We're creating a condition that's turning on the light and the recognition of what you've always known and who you have always been. And now that starts to, but that does take action. You've got to show up and you got to do the work. You got to get on your own side, that's self-help. You got to begin to develop your life, that's personal development. And now you have the conditions where that self that never can be improved and has never been damaged can emerge.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think, again, it's so important to touch on, because we can get caught in this idea that, like, oh, well, I don't need, training or development or like whatever. It's
Yeah.
all in here. And yes, it is.
Yes.
And yet people are going to be able to shine lights, in those dark spaces, or like uncover that
Exactly.
part of the woods, or like take you on that hike into your inner being that, reveals this lake where you're like, oh my God, there's a lake there. I didn't even know that.
Oh,
You
I
know what I
love that
mean?
analogy. I love that. It's beautiful. Yeah, you need a guide that's already traversed the terrain
Yeah.
and also knows where the snake pits are and the cliffs are, and they can go, oh, take a step over here, or then you get into this area and it looks dangerous. Don't worry, I know it looks dangerous, but I've been here. It's fine. You can cross here. And
Yeah.
and then they open up vistas and landscapes of new possibilities that were always there in the frontier of your soul, but you had to be willing to discover it. The frontier is already there. It's just undiscovered territory. And
Right.
and yeah, so the journey of having guides is journeying you through there, and maps, the people that have been there and left the map behind. It's like, yeah, this is where the dragons are. This is where, and so and that's why there's more than one of us here.
Right.
The world is a reflection of our unintegrated, the unintegrated fragments of our own soul, or psyche,
Yes.
which means
Yes.
soul. And so we project our inner master teachers, we project our wisdom, we project our power, and then we see it in a person, in a book, in an opportunity, in an experience. And one of the practices you want to do while you are working with people and books and all that is you want to keep remembering, though, that whatever genius and greatness and mastery you see in these people that you want to embody, the only reason you see it and resonate with it is because it's a projection of your own unintegrated power. So while you're working with them, keep remembering they're not your source. They're just a channel. They're not the sage on the stage. They're just a guide on the side. And everything that you love about them and admire about them and are even jealous about them is a dimension of your own power. Reclaim it, own it, and then you will grow and eventually no longer be just their student, but their colleague.
Yes.
And maybe even eventually their teacher. That's the process.
Love it.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, and it all comes back to this idea, that everything is consciousness. And so it's all available. It's just like, like going back to kind of your IV thing in the very beginning, you know what I mean? Like you're hooked up to certain lines of consciousness, and it's flowing very well. So, but there are other lines, you can hook into. And anyways, that's not a great visualization, but
it's true, and it's like, what are you plugged into? What are you hooked up to?
Yeah. And what do you want to take out, and unhook?
And what do you want to take out?
It's all the Matrix, pretty much.
Exactly.
Just watch the Matrix and you'll get it.
Watch the Matrix. Meditate on the Matrix. Meditate for a year on the Matrix, and you will have a breakthrough. It's like a Zen koan, What is the sound of one hand clapping? Show me the face you had before your parents were born. Just meditate on the Matrix, and you'll be good to go.
Good. Well, Derek, how can they find out more about you, or get into some of your training and all that?
They have to take the blue pill first.
Not the red.
Not the red. Isn't the blue pill the one that sends you into the Matrix? I think it's the blue pill.
I'm already there, so I forget.
Right. Yeah, they can. Obviously, you can go to DerekRydall.com, DerekRydall.com, and there's a bunch of free resources, downloads, audios, etc. But you can also get a free Law of Emergence training at www.lawofelmergence.com. And then if you're interested in getting the book, which breaks down the whole framework of how to engineer your own emergence, the book Emergence, you can go to myemergencebook.com. And when you get it through those links on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, I'm going to give you like an extra, I think it's almost $1,800 in programs and coaching and support. So myemergencebook.com to grab the book and a bunch of bonuses, lawofemergence.com to get a training around it. And also I have a podcast just called Emergence with about 100 deep dive trainings around this. So those are some places you guys can check me out and let me support you in making this real and practical. I know we went down the rabbit hole today, but I really want you guys to get that this is so practical. I'm all about real results. And that's why I've used this work to get my dream homes, to go from one-room apartments living on my mac and cheese to million-dollar homes and global travel and seven-figure business and, love relationships and family and all the wonderful accoutrements of a great life. It's very practical. So I want to help you take this very transcendent principle, but make it very imminent and very practical in your everyday life so that you really look back and you realize this was a moment, an inflection point where your life got on track even more and you began to have even more results.
Yeah, and I think we got to bring you back on or have you in Soul Tribe too, because there's just so much to tease out from all this. So thank you so much, Derek.
You're welcome, man.
Such a pleasure, and we'll see you soon, Soul Warriors.
You got it. Peace.
Can you stay on for a sec? Just with me?